Hi, I'm Adam and welcome to another edition of South Wales Ghost Watch. And today we're going to be talking about past life regression. And on the show today I've got once again Dr. Martin Shrewsbury. Okay. Right. And Martin, I want to ask you, past life regression, where does it originate from?
Well, it's a very long history. We're used to in the West of thinking of things of having a beginning and an end. The Judeo-Christian idea in which we live at the moment as influencers talks about the beginning of the world and the end of the world, largely because we are all born and we all die. So we're used to time having a definite ending. If you go back further than that, if you go to the East, there's an idea that that the world goes on and on and on. A lot of people would have looked at the way the seasons happen. We move through a cycle of spring, summer, autumn and winter. Well, perhaps not so much now. And then spring starts again. And you look at the trees, you look at the animals, they come back. The plants seem to die off in the spring, die off in the winter and become again during the spring. So it's quite easy for tribespeople, for Easterners, I suppose, as a whole, to make the assumption that we see that when we die, we logically should come back. Now each plant, each animal, when it comes back, is slightly different. So hence there's the idea that we have within us an eternal bit that turns up again in another body. The best way to think of it is like when we go to sleep at night, we don't wear the same clothes the next day. We dress the true personality, we dress the true individual in another set of clothes, another personality in the next life. Okay. And so the fascination, the ancient Greeks believed that after death we go down to this place where we rest for a while before we are reborn, and we drink from the river Lethe, which helps us to forget what has happened before in a previous life. So from that whole sort of idea is the idea of past and future lives. To be fair to St. Augustine, founder of the Christian church largely, he always believed in pre-existence. And there were some early stages where the Christian church, before its present form, toyed with the idea. If you think of some of the accounts of the coming of Jesus, somebody says he's Elijah, he's Enoch, reborn. There's that idea. So it's not so alien to the West that we're used to thinking of things of beginning and end, whereas in other cultures we're used to a cycle of return. There is this idea that things happen again, they go round in circles. Okay. And with the growth of the New Age, with the interest in parapsychology, we begin to wonder, are ghosts, are spirits, beings prior to a future existence, or are they beings who know they are not dead? There's all sorts of questions like that. So the existence of past lives is a very strong cultural influence. I have a friend who, at the age of 3 or 4, decided that he could speak Russian and spoke it quite well. Okay. He had no connection with Russia at all.
And you haven't learned Russian?
No, but he does speak Russian now fluently. Yeah. So that's an interesting example. Okay. That is an idea that perhaps somebody as talented as Mozart was a musician in previous lives. Whether I've been listening to people's problems for years upon years upon years, I must have been an evil bastard in previous incarnations.
So what determines our previous lives then, as such?
Well, there's a number of ways of looking at this. Let's look at it in Eastern and Western terms, starting with the Buddhist idea. The idea is that if we become aware of the things we've done wrong in a previous life, we are, if you like, we get rewards for the karma of recognising that we must live more healthy and good lives. And that the purpose of life after life is to improve ourselves, to move away from being savage murderers to being enlightened beings. And the really scary thing about past lives are, let us remember, if there are past lives, that when we complain about some evil person who's done something in the present, can we be not sure that we might have done something equally?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, and that we are, if you like, learning about suffering and pain and hurting people by learning to be more honest, more truthful, more authentic, and gradually moving forward. So it's like a process of refining, moving from the different types, it's like moving through different versions of Windows as we move on to a more perfect operating system so we can really understand our potential. So you've got that idea from the East. They also believe, of course, if you do terrible things, you might actually sink to a lower level. You might come back as a worm or
Something worse, yeah.
or something like that, because you haven't valued the gift of humanity.
Okay.
So that just as it's possible to rise, so it is possible to fall.
So you don't believe that life is a curse, it's a gift?
Life is a gift.
Life is a gift, yes.
Life is a gift. And I think some of the more gloomy religions of the West that say we are not here to enjoy ourselves, that we are not here, that life is suffering,
Yeah.
will probably create life upon life upon life of equal suffering and gloominess.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah? If you learn to seize the day and risk, that might be the way, theoretically, that you would move forward. In the West, we tend not to look at the same things as animal incarnations, but that we gradually move through gaining understanding. And there is that tradition, isn't there, that sort of psychic gifts, intuitive abilities, may well be something we've learned in past lives that we are using, that we can use and move forward. The one thing that really scared me, M. Scott Peck wrote a book about a therapist who died, and in the next world, he didn't have an hour session. He worked with the client till the client got better. So the therapy sessions never ended till the client broke through. That fills me full of horror, so I better keep being a nice person. I sometimes wonder what I could possibly have done that I have to help people's pain in this life. So much. Who knows?
Yes, okay.
So that's the theory of it, how it fits in.
Okay, the next question I wanted to ask you was, how can we access our past lives?
Okay. Right. Well, let's sort of think about how we might get hints of past lives. There will be things we like and things we dislike. There will be sorts of music that you know instantly, and certain sort of places and situations that you dislike, or situations that you like. There will be certain things you are drawn to. If you're naturally drawn to the interest in parapsychological stuff, it would probably indicate that you've always asked questions, that this is not the first life you've had as somebody interested in parapsychology, that you're looking for bigger things, more interesting explanations. So past lives may show us our abilities and our weaknesses. I'm not going to ask any particular personal questions here, but sometimes we meet somebody who we are instantly drawn to. Wow, I like him or her. And it might be
Love at first sight.
a love at first sight. It might be somebody that you have known before. There is a tendency or belief that we're drawn back to groups again and again.
Do you believe in a soulmate?
Right, soulmate. Right. Let's talk about the origin of that. Do you know that that comes from the works of the philosopher Plato, the idea of soulmate? Originally, there were creatures, he told this legend, who were both male and female, and had everything, and they got a bit So Zeus decided to split them into two. And the tradition was that therefore we were looking for the other half of our apple to complete. So the idea of a soulmate is an interesting one. You know the old favourite things, before you meet the handsome prince or beautiful princess, you have to kiss a lot of frogs. You have to try lots of other halves of the apple. You can sometimes be lucky, or you can have that instantaneous feeling. A soulmate might be somebody who you can live with perfectly well. But a soulmate could also be somebody, if there are past lives, and you've betrayed somebody horribly in a past life, that they're there again in this one to help you sort out the problem. Okay. Soulmates can be either positive or negative according to the traditions. And there are sometimes people walk through the door and you think, wow. And you might think they're beautiful, or you might just fancy them like mad. And it might be just the memory that they were a lover in a previous incarnation. Something about them strikes you. Yeah. 2 or 3 times in my life I've come across people like that who I thought, oh my God. And they've struck home. So a soulmate will be somebody to help you achieve and understand yourself and them. That could be positive. That could be negative. And you might not only have soulmates you're drawn to, you might have soul groups, which is the other thing, both positive and negative. I'm convinced, I can't prove any of this, I'm convinced that I've been a priest in many past lives. I'm not a priest in this one. I doctor the human psyche in this one. But a couple of times, there's a rather strange picture of me with my son in my arms when he was just born. And I had a beard. I looked like a rabbi. I could almost see the hat on top. And I remember very strongly walking around Venice on a holiday about 20 odd years ago, and out of the local synagogue came the local rabbi and invited me in. Was convinced that I was a fellow rabbi. Yeah. Or you might get drawn to particular outlooks, particular approaches in life. And sometimes we see echoes of them in people. And in the people we know, and people we traditionally like or dislike. So, being drawn to a soul group might be continued work together as a group of people who have incarnated together, or it might be a group of people that you've done something naughty with, and you're back there to do something with to make it better. If you think about it logically, if there are past lives, there's no excuses. You can't get away with a thing. You have to come to terms with it. And the best way we come to terms with who we are is how we relate to other people and also to the groups we belong to. Historically, I've always been on the left in politics, and I've been a troublemaker and a rebel. I think I've had many lives like that. It appeals to me naturally. And you might have certain forms of music you're attracted to. My son is 17, he'll kill me if he sees this, but he loves 70s music. I love 16th century music, choral music, that sort of thing. I like 18th century music. They're supposed to be indicators of being drawn back to particular times of things. My ex-wife, when she used to hear 16th century music, said it made her feel terribly depressed. I think it's wonderful. And I was very interested, and I don't want to ask any more than this. In the novel 50 Shades of Grey, they talk about a piece of music written by Thomas Tallis in the 16th century called Speminalium. It's part of the book as a major erotic indicator. I saw the erotic potential in Speminalium by Thomas Tallis over 20 years ago, so I don't want to ask too much about what I was doing during that 16th century life. So we all get drawn back in particular ways, and so it's people, music, particular smells, particular tastes.
Okay.
Those sorts of things might tell us.
So are there any good or bad points to past life regression?
Yes, there are some very good points and some very bad points. The good points are, I think we could talk about 3 or 4 of them. It gives us a perspective that we are eternal creatures who are doing our best moving forward. There is no heaven, there is no hell. There is only how we create our heaven or our hell. That's a very healthy thing. The only judgment day that occurs is the judgment that we have at the end of each life, trying to work out what we need to do best. Secondly, we are all in it together. We are all moving forward, gradually trying to make sense of our existence. Thirdly, it gives us the ability to take skills, abilities on. Fourthly, it helps us to understand that we all suffer and we should be compassionate to one another, and that if anybody who's murdered in this life, we may have murdered in past lives. You know, there is a famous book written by Kahlil Gibran where he says the person who is murdered and the person who is robbed may not be entirely innocent in what happens. I don't mean they deserve it, but the causal effect might go back all that way, and it gives a possible way of explaining it.
Yeah.
You know, I
Or
cannot
why
accept...
they deserved their fate and
Yeah,
stuff like that.
I cannot accept that just for 70 years of depravity, we get locked up in hell for eternity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we face our own heaven and our hell.
Okay.
So there's 4 possibilities to good. Who should not be regressed? Well, suppose our intrepid Ian over there, who's hiding behind the camera, decided that he wanted to avoid a particular problem in this life he was having, and wanted to find out what happened in his past life. If you're going to go back into past life stuff, it's best to sort out the problems you have in this one with this particular issue before you put everything in to that past one. Yeah? So it should not be used as a means of avoiding problems. It should be used as a means of addressing problems and having further insight into the life we're living now, how to improve ourselves. Naturally, you should not be regressed if you're schizophrenic, if you're chronically depressed, if you have some form of eating disorder. Yeah, I've heard lots of interesting theories about that. So it cannot be used as a means of avoiding situations. It should be look at a means of interpreting things. There's a lot of ideas that we might also pass on group memories. I remember vigorously about 25 years ago, when I was practicing meditation, having a memory or dream of being in the Warsaw Ghetto as the Nazis were coming to murder people during the Jewish uprising. And just as they burst in, I woke up. Now, was that me? I do have Jewish blood. I do have Sephardic Jewish blood going back to the 16th century from Spain. Is that a memory? Is it a racial memory, a group memory, a personal memory? I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you cannot use it as a means of excuse. It is not a substitute for therapy. It's not a means of avoiding this life. This life is what matters. Past lives give you indications of what goes on in this one. You are here now. So it's not an evasion. Some people will say past life therapy is not a good idea because it helps people avoid. That's nonsense. The person who is conducting the past life therapy should make sure the people they're working with are not people who are avoiding this life. They should be people who want to enrich their present life and also it helps deal with the fear of death as well.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. So how does progression or regression relate to each other? Or do they differ?
Right. There was a woman called Helen Wambach who was, like me, during the day, a conventional psychotherapist. And she began, which is what we're hoping to do in the few months ahead, to begin to regress large groups of people. And she handed out a questionnaire at the end, and she began to ask what age they were, what time they were at, what they were wearing. And throughout her life, she's written many books, spelled Whambach. She probably regressed well over 2,000 people. And she found that if you look at a population of the world on a graph, from the beginning approximately, the sample of the age, the times in which the people said they had these lives, followed that. It was almost as if there weren't enough bodies to fit round, so they had to wait till the body became available. So she found that, and hey, most people had absolutely standard lives. Well, wouldn't you expect that to happen? If you think that there weren't many Boadiceas, there weren't many Julius Caesars, Alexander the Great. Most people were, to quote that famous, plebs, like we all are, working in different ages, and they were peasants. As 98% of the population were, there were no aristocrats, there were no rulers. So, but what they found was there were lots of interesting information from that mirrored the availability of the clothes, the colours, the population that was available. So Helen Wambach's book is very, very interesting. Helen Wambach died about 20 years ago, and some of her work was carried on by a couple of her colleagues, where they began to talk about what they called future life progression. Now let's talk about the future. None of us know what's going to happen in the next half an hour. A saber-toothed tiger could come through that door there, or it might not. Now the effects of a saber-toothed tiger coming through that door would be rather dramatic to the rest of our lives. Yeah? Admittedly we could run away, it would eat Ian while we ran through there. But that would be rather serious for Ian's future life. So if you think about it, there are possibilities, yeah? I'm sure you all remember doing probabilities at school, yeah? About this could happen and this could happen.
Yeah.
So let's put it like this. If you're aware of possibilities and insights into the past and situations that you might want to have, as you move forward into the future, there are points where possibilities occur. Yeah? So it depends, at each time it gets more complex. So if you think about it, if we know about the past and understand ourselves, we make it more likely that we can predict our future. So progression gives us possibilities of what we may be if we continue on at the past. I remember a Blackadder Christmas special where if things went one way, Baldric became ruler of the universe, and if it went another way, Rowan Atkinson's character became the ruler of the universe. So, you know, progression is interesting, it shows possibilities, but it shows we have choice repeatedly over and over again, and nothing is fixed. Yeah?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah? There are paths of least resistance. Yeah? And I do think that if you have got karmic stuff to sort out, somehow you will run into people that you need to run into.
There's also the idea as well that parallel universes where every possible outcome has been played out.
Yes, that's right.
As we speak, so what you mentioned earlier about, you know, the fact.
So is it that we slip in and out of those?
Yes, yeah.
And it depends which parallel universe you go to. Remember, we all create our world. We're all,
Yeah. And we're all responsible for our
we're
own
all
fate as well.
responsible for our own fate.
Oh, okay.
The ancient Egyptians believed that we were all on our way to becoming gods in inverted commas, and that the process of incarnation was to reach that stage where we became divine beings.
Okay.
And I think it's damn sight different to thinking, yes, I can become a being of divinity rather than I'm a miserable worm full of sin on the earth. It doesn't really help your self-esteem very much.
Okay, so do you believe in miracles and divine intervention? Do you believe that, that's possible?
I believe in miracles and divine intervention. A miracle, George Bernard Shaw said, was an event that caused faith. I think we cause miracles by believing in ourselves, and all sorts of things are possible. Are there divine beings? Well, if we are in this process of evolution towards becoming more and more powerful, then it would be logical that the creator, creatrix, would have been a being at one point like us who is working their way through as well. The whole is processing through. And this is why I find this so comforting, because it's up to us.
Yeah. We are in charge of our own destiny.
We are in charge of our own destiny. The tragedy may be that when people get stuck in loops, that might explain hauntings. Yeah?
Yes, yeah.
Or it may simply be a gap. I always remember the bit in The Matrix when Neo goes to this tube station between the worlds, and he's stuck there, and the train keeps going round and round and round. Perhaps that's a model for hauntings. I don't know. Perhaps that's a model for all of us, you know. Keep moving forward, or if you stop moving forward, you are static, and things are stuck.
Okay. So how does religion come into past life regression? How does that relate?
Well, that's an interesting one.
Or does it determine what past lives we have, or what past lives we've had? Sorry.
If we believe something strongly enough, it tends to influence the ways we limit ourselves, as the ways we interpret the world. There are a number of problems with organised religion and past lives. In the East, it's tempting to say everything that meant to happen was karmic, so there's nothing we can do about it, so let's just sit down. Yeah? There is an idea in the West that you will be judged, that there's some guy out there who's going to make a final judgment on you, and that there's nothing you can do, that your fate is sealed. So it means that that's the opposite of it. So religions that do not emphasise the value of ourselves and the fact that we are eternal beings experiencing a material life tend to limit how we see things. So I get very nervous. Bertrand Russell said, only fools and fanatics are sure. I prefer to be making my own mind up and finding more information all of the time. I think the truly religious and the truly spiritual people of the very best quality have that in themselves. But the very worst decide they want to burn, hang, kill the unbelievers. Let's think of the life of Brian, where his shoe falls off and they almost kill one another, trying to argue what it means. All we can be sure is what it means to us. So we have to keep an open mind. Past life belief does not exclude religions. It's a part that's left out in many. So it's something that should be considered.
Okay.
Yeah, there is the idea. They asked Jesus in the Bible, was he Elijah? Was he reborn? There is that tendency of belief in past lives in Judaism at that point. There's even belief in it. St. Augustine, the founder of Christianity, believed there was pre-existence, that we existed somewhere else before. So it depends. Let's say it's perfectly compatible, but you have to be pretty insightful to grasp it.
Okay. Moving on, you mentioned prior to the interview about a Tibetan Book of Living and Dying?
Yes,
Could you
yes.
just shed some light on that?
Yeah. The Tibetan Book of Living and Dying is designed to be read to the dying person, to reassure them that they continue. The idea is, to the Tibetan, at the moment of death, you shift into another bardo, another reality, where you wander around for 40 days, till you choose to be reborn. But that's why, according to that idea, that it's important you keep calm and relaxed and don't panic and realise that things from your past life, the life that has just left, is a particular thing that happened in that life and it does not affect the future. So it's designed as a means of giving the individuality, the bit that's eternal, to explain that it has possibilities of the future and should not panic.
Okay.
The Tibetans would have said that it's easy, you can get lost, you can panic and end up being reborn in that you're not aiming to be, it's just influenced by your thoughts. I remember in the film Ghost, the Patrick Swayze character comes across a character that is haunting the New York underground, and he's dying for a fag.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, that's right.
And the reason he's stuck there, he's dying for a fag. Yeah?
Yeah.
So the idea of the Tibetan Book of the Dead is that you understand, it's an advice to say that this is what you do. This is how you do it. It's a manual for the dying to move on to a better life.
Okay, and it's providing reassurance that death isn't such a bad thing.
Precisely.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, Carl Gustav Jung, the great Western psychologist, wrote an introduction to that book. And remember, there is a sort of a tendency in our lives that if we believe that all our relationships are bad, if we believe we continually make mistakes, then we get stuck in that pattern. The Tibetans are just logically following it and saying, if a life is lived in a particular way, then without realising it, you can keep that pattern going on and on and on. So that you have to understand what is happening for you to move on.
Okay, so reincarnation, is that infinite? Do we live infinite lives when we're reincarnated?
Well, the Buddha said that we could not speculate on how the world was created or what happened to us when we reached this process. It's called nirvana, of all enlightenment and understanding. The idea is that we live multiple lives so that we understand the purpose of existence, so that reincarnation is infinite, yeah, and therefore we have responsibility. Now let's think of it like this. Suppose you think, I don't give a toss what's going to happen in 200 years, yeah, because I'm not going to be here. That doesn't encourage you to help look after people, to look after the planet. If you are there in 200 years' time, you're not masters of this world, you're stewards, you're looking after it. You're responsible to the people that you are about. There's an old Indian proverb that says, we do not inherit the earth from our parents, we keep it safe for our children. And there isn't a cop-out in this idea of infinite lives. It means that we're working towards some other thing, where who knows what happens to us, we move on. Does the primal mammal, did the mammal that lived during the dinosaur age ever realise that it was going to become human? No. So we are evolving towards something else, and that's why reincarnation is very valid. It helps us understand that we have responsibility and meaning and purpose and responsibilities.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, well I think I'll leave it there. I don't have any more questions to ask, but thanks very much for your time.
Can I just before you go?
Oh yeah, of course.
Suggest there is a play written by the famous writer J.B. Priestley.
Okay.
J.B. Priestley was a down-to-earth guy. He's written books like An Inspector Calls. He wrote a play called I've Been Here Before. It's a lovely little play, and it's about meeting people who are significant. It says that throughout each life there are crucial moments when we meet somebody or a situation happens where it's one of those points of diversion. It can go one way or the other. And he talks about a group of people just accepting that they can do their best and not be and what happens. And it's a very good, interesting point to start at thinking about the implications of past lives. J.B. Priestley once got on a plane and they said, "I'm sorry, Mr. Priestley, you can't come on this plane. You're smoking your pipe." And he said, "If I don't smoke my pipe, I will die." So they kicked him off. The plane took off and he crashed into the North Sea. And he said that proved that smoking pipe saved your life. He said that he felt at that moment, though seriously, that there was a crucial point where people sensed something. We know from statistics that the number of people on a train or a plane, or the number of people who cancelled their meetings in the Twin Towers for September the 11th, I had a friend who did that, had a sense, in some sense, that there was something happening and that something should be done differently. Perhaps that's how we do it.
I think you mentioned prior to the interview that the planes were very quiet as well. There wasn't many passengers.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
So it may be that there is something within us that senses possibilities for the future. So, you know, we are looking for people to do past lives, and we'll have to put them through vigorous channels to check that they are suitable. But we'll see what evil swine you've been in past lives and what saints you can become in future ones.
Well, we'll have to do our research first and find out who's the valuable candidates, I suppose.
Well, that's right, yes.
Okay, well, thanks very much, Matt and Shrewsbury, for coming on the show.
Thank you.
And it's been a pleasure, as always, having you here. Okay, well, on next week's show, we have Geraint Hopkins, also known as Snake Man, from Ghostwatch Wales, live on our show, so that should be quite interesting. Well, that's all for me now, and tune in next week. Should be a lot of fun. Same time, Thursday, 7 o'clock. Thank you. Bye.
Bye. And may your future lives go with you.
Are you going to do you want to kill that?